Chapter 4. Saved by a Storm. When newly engaged people like Denry and Ruth want to go away on a summer holiday, there are many things to think about. A businessman, for example, who lives by collecting rents every week, cannot go away easily for two. And a young woman who lives alone must always be careful about what other people think. So Ruth asked her friend Nellie Cottrell to go with her. Ruth and Nellie took a room together at 26 St Asaph's Road, Llandudno. Denry took a room at number 28 St Asaph's Road. Who could want more? Denry had never seen the sea before. As he walked along the beach in his best clothes, with the girls on either side of him, he thought it was all wonderful. He also saw fantastic possibilities for making money, because here were 50,000 people, all on holiday, all wanting to do interesting things, and all with money to spend. Denry thought about this a lot, because he felt he was now a serious person. He had something to live for. He was very pleased and happy to be engaged to Ruth, although still a little surprised. What could this fine young lady see in him? They had not discussed money at all, although Denry wanted to. It was clear that Ruth thought he was a rich man, and Denry was spending a lot of money. In fact, he could not move without paying for something. The pier, swimming, ice cream, chairs, fruit, boat trips, photographs, teas, coffees. Even a short walk with Ruth was expensive. Ruth had very little money, but it didn't worry her. She didn't know what money was, and she spent Denry's like water. The gentle, silent Nellie often asked to pay for something herself, but of course Denry couldn't let her. He liked Nellie Cottrell. She thought that he and Ruth were wonderful, and although she was a very quiet person, she was also very sensible. At the end of the first week, Denry was getting more and more worried about money. On the Monday morning, he went back to Bursley to collect rents, and returned to Llandudno on Tuesday evening, with his pockets full of rent money. Something had to happen, he thought. He didn't know what it was, but 3 months of engagement with Ruth Earp was going to leave him penniless. He was saved by a storm at sea. They woke up on Wednesday morning to find the rain and wind crashing against the windows. The three walked down into the town, where they learnt that the town's lifeboat had gone out to a ship further along the coast. A second lifeboat, an old one now owned by a fisherman, had gone out to a Norwegian ship, the Hjalmar, which was in difficulties just off Llandudno itself. Everyone in the town was watching the lifeboat save the sailors while the ship went down. Denry and the girls went onto the pier, and Denry even got his feet wet helping 1 or 2 of the Norwegian sailors from the lifeboat onto the pier. After that, he talked for a time to Crogeen, the owner of the lifeboat. It was a very exciting day, and it gave Denry an idea. "I'll write a report about all this for the Signal," he said. This was the Five Towns daily newspaper. "Oh, yes," said Nellie. "What a good idea." The next morning, Denry was up early to send the report off by train. Then he and the girls walked into town and spent more money. Everybody in the town was talking about the storm, the wreck of the Hjalmar, and the wonderful rescue of all the Norwegian sailors by the lifeboat. After a few minutes, Ruth turned to Denry. "I had the bill for our room this morning," she said. "Oh," he said. "Did you pay it?" "Yes, but now I've almost no money left. We spent so much money while you were away in Bursley. You don't know how quickly money goes." She waited a moment, then said, "I suppose we'll have to go home." "What a pity," said Denry sadly. Of course, Ruth wanted Denry to say that he could pay for her to stay. But all he said was, "What a pity." "I think I'll go home this afternoon." "I'm sorry," said Denry. At that moment, a hand touched his arm. It was Cregeen.
"Mr. Machin, it's now or never. It's £25 if you can pay today."
"Right," said Denry. "I'll see you this evening." Ruth pretended not to be interested in any of this. Poor Nellie. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what it was. All she knew was that her holiday was coming to a sudden end. In the evening, the three of them walked to the station. "Where's your luggage?" Ruth asked Denry. "I'm not going. I've got business here." There was a bookshop in the station. Denry bought the Signal, which had just come in, and there was his report. "Terrible storm in North Wales. A report by Mr. E. H. Machin of Bursley." Denry was ready to explode with happiness. But he gave the newspaper calmly to Ruth. She did not look at it. "We'll read it on the train," she said. The bookshop also had a lot of souvenirs of Llandudno. Ruth wanted a glass plate with a picture of Great Orme Head on it, but the man in the shop said that they had sold out. "Couldn't you get one and send it to me?" said Ruth. "Oh, yes," said the man, taking out a book. "What name?" Ruth looked at Denry, in the way that a woman always looks at a man when she wants him to pay. "Rothschild," said Denry. "The millionaire." These words ended their engagement. The next day, Denry received by post a ring in a box with a short letter. "I only said Rothschild," said Denry to himself. But secretly, he was pleased. An hour later, Denry met Cregeen and was soon the owner of the old Llandudno lifeboat. He then went to find Simeon, an old sailor with a white beard. He had been in the lifeboat when they rescued the men on the Hjalmar. "I've got the boat," said Denry. "I'll give you £2 for the week."
"All right," said the old man. "And I've seen 3 of those Norwegians. They don't speak English, but they understand about the money."
"Good," said Denry. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." At 5 o'clock the next morning, a boat left Llandudno. There were 6 men rowing, 3 of them Norwegians. There was also a man with a white beard and Denry. In 20 minutes, they were at the wreck of the Hjalmar, and Denry was feeling very ill. 20 minutes more, and he was happy to be back on land. At 10 o'clock that morning, 2 Norwegian sailors were walking around the town, giving little notices to everyone they met. "The wreck of the Hjalmar. Famous rescue at Llandudno. Every day at 11, 12, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 o'clock, the famous lifeboat which rescued the Norwegian sailors will visit the wreck of the Hjalmar. The lifeboat's captain is Simeon Edwards, one of the rescuers, and the lifeboat is rowed by 3 of the rescued Norwegians. Return trip, 12 pence. On the first day, Denry made £12. That evening, he received a packet in the post. It was from Nellie. There was a box of chocolates and a note which said, "Thank you very much for the holiday. I hope you will like these. Nellie." Denry was very pleased by this. Ruth's young friend, he thought, was much more grateful than Ruth herself. The boat trips out to the wreck became more and more popular. In the afternoons, Denry had to ask 25 pence. It was the only way to stop the big crowds that were waiting on the beach. Soon, he was making £100 a week. He was sorry the wreck had happened in August and not July. He was sorry there were not 2 or even 40 Hjalmars. One day in September, when business was beginning to slow down, he was down to £50 a week, Denry had a very pleasant surprise. He met Nellie on the beach, and it was a fact that seeing her gave him a great feeling of happiness. She was with her father, Councillor Cottrell, and her mother. The councillor was a builder who had become rich building cheap houses for the people of the 5 towns.
"Well, young man,"
said Councillor Cottrell. He continued to call Denry young man in a way that made Denry cross. "I've made more money this summer than you have in a year," he said silently to the councillor's back. "You must have dinner with me one evening," Denry said finally. "At the Majestic." The Majestic was the finest and most expensive hotel in Llandudno. Some of the waiters were French. They agreed to go the next day. Then Mrs. Cottrell remembered that Ruth was coming to stay with them for a few days. "Bring her along too," said Denry. the dinner was a great success. Denry had never arranged a dinner before, but it was easy. You just walked into the hotel in the morning and said what you wanted. The hotel arranged everything. And it was easy to meet a woman who had just broken off her engagement to you. You just said, "Good afternoon, how are you?" And she said the same. Then you shook hands. And there you were, still alive. After the meal, Denry walked back with the others to their hotel. Councillor Cottrell had stopped calling Denry young man. He now called him my boy. "That lifeboat, it was just an idea, my boy, just an idea." "Yes," said Denry, "but I thought of it." "The question is," said the councillor, "can you think of any more ideas as good?" "Well," said Denry, "can you?" When they reached the Cottrells' hotel, Ruth waited a moment while the others went in, and then turned to Denry. "I don't feel like sleeping at all. I suppose you wouldn't like to go for a walk?" "Well, I suppose you're very tired." "No," he replied. "It's this moonlight I'm afraid of." A few days later, the Cottrells and Ruth Earp went home, and Denry went with them. He had now sold the lifeboat and brought all his business in Llandudno to an end. He had very little luggage, but he did have a new hat box. It was very heavy. When Denry got home, he was pleased to see his mother again. She had often collected his rents for him during the summer, and had done it very well. He gave the hat box to her, and she immediately dropped it. "I don't want any of your games, young man," she said crossly. "What's in it?" "Some pretty stones from the beach." She picked up the hat box, opened it, and screamed. It fell to the floor with a crash, and Mrs. Machin was standing up to her ankles in money. She could see coins running all over the floor. At last they stopped moving, and then it was silent. Denry could hear his heart beating. For once in her life, his mother could not find a word to say. For several days afterwards, Mrs. Machin was still picking up coins. The story of the money in the hat box quickly went round the town. It was Denry's latest, and people talked about it for weeks afterwards.